Yes, hello guys. Today we are going to do preparation of the final account of the manufacturing entity. That's what I want to do. So, uh, so I hope you are all okay and fine. So I hope you are all okay and fine, and I hope you can see my body clearly. So preparation of final account of manufacturing entity. Preparation of the final account. Preparation of the final account. Preparation of the final account of our manufacturing entity. This is just a makeup class for those who did not manage to join the other day. It is a makeup class for those who did not manage to join the other day, and I hope you can see my board clearly. I don't know about I don't know if you can see my board clearly, but I hope you can. I hope you can see the board very clearly as we move on. And this is the recording actually. It is a recording. It is just a recording of what we are supposed to do. So when we talk about manufacturing account, remember manufacturing account is an account which is prepared purposely to account for the the raw material, the raw material. So that's say manufacturing account, manufacturing, manufacturing uh, account. So manufacturing account, and we say that this account which reports the cost incurred in producing goods. So this is the account. This is the account which reports. So this is the account which reports. Both purposes they report the cost incurred in producing a product. Cost incurred in producing product. In producing uh, product. So cost incurred in producing product. Cost incurred in producing products. Now, remember, purchases will not be recorded in this account. Will not recorded in the income statement, but rather it will be recorded in the manufacturing account. So purchases. So the main purpose of preparing this account is to account for the purchases of raw materials. So the main objective of preparing this account, objective of preparing this account, of preparing uh, this account is to. So the main objective of preparing this account mostly is to account for the purchase of raw material, to account for purchases of raw materials. That's the main function. Though we have other, it also account for other costs, but mostly we want to account for the raw material or the purchases. That one is okay. Now, and we shall classify costs into so classification of costs. We shall classify costs according to nature of the manufacturing. So classification of cost. So according to the nature of manufacturing, according to nature of manufacturing, of manufacturing. So how do you classify cost according to the nature of manufacturing? So when we classify cost according to the nature of manufacturing, we have two. We have two of them. So number one, we have direct material. So we have direct materials. And what are the direct materials? These are the costs which can be traced back to the product. So we say, so not direct material, but rather direct cost. Direct cost. Direct cost. And we say these are the costs which can be traced back to the product. So these are the costs which can be traced back, traced back to the product, back to the product. So these are the costs which can be traced back to the product, or the costs which can be linked or can be identified with the product. You can also say these are the costs which can be identified with the product. These are the costs which can be directly be identified with the product, with the product, with the product. And then you can also say there another name of this cost is prime cost, also called prime cost, also called prime cost. So they are also called prime cost. Now let us see categories of the direct cost. Categories of direct cost. So we have three categories also under direct cost. We have direct material cost, direct material cost. These are the cost of raw material which can be identified with the product. These are the cost of raw material which can be identified with the product. So we say this is the cost of raw material which can be identified with the product, which can be identified with the product, with the product, or which can be traced back to the product. So the cost, the main cost of material which can be traced back to the product, which can be traced back to the product is what we call the direct material cost. So for example, if you make a chair, the cost of wood is the direct material used. So you can easily say the cost of the wood. But we have some other items like glue or maybe some nails that have been used to make that table or that chair, which it is not the main part. You cannot easily say the cost of the nails, because maybe if you buy a particular kilograms of kg can make maybe even 20 chairs. So you cannot really say the cost of or cost of nails of one chair, but the wood that is used to make that chair, you can easily say that is what we call the direct material cost. You have direct labor cost, direct labor cost, direct labor cost, and you say this is the cost. This is the human effort. This is the human effort. The human efforts incurred in production, in production, in production of goods, of the product, not of the product, of the product, and they can be identified, and the cost can be identified with the product. The cost can be identified with the product, with the product. Then you have number three, also form parts of the direct cost. Is what we call the direct expenses. Direct expenses. Direct expenses. So these are other expenses which can be traced back to the product. So these are other expenses which can be traced back to the product. So these are other expenses, other costs which can be traced back to the product, which can be traced back to the product. Now, remember that all these three items forms what we call the prime cost. all these costs form what we call the prime cost. So prime cost is equal to direct material cost, plus direct labor cost plus direct expense. So this is the formula for prime cost. So prime cost is equals to direct material cost plus, so direct material cost ndio ya kwanza, so direct material cost plus direct labor cost ndio hiyo DLC, and then DE is the direct labor. So that's number one, classification according to nature. Number two, according to the nature of manufacturing. Number two, talk about indirect cost. Indirect cost, and we say these are the costs which cannot be traced back to the product. These are the costs which cannot be traced back to the product. These are the costs which cannot be traced back to the product. Or you can also say these are the costs which cannot be identified with the product. You can also say these are the costs which cannot be identified with the product. Which cannot be identified with the product. So that's another way you can explain it, that this also refers to other costs which cannot be identified with the product. They include the following. Okay, before we change, they can also be called, uh, factory overhead, overheads. And remember, another name of overheads is indirect cost. Remember, another name of the word overheads is indirect. No, but remember, because we are dealing with factory, so manufacturing deals with factory, so we call it the factory overhead, or production. You can also call them the production overheads. You can also call them the production overheads. So you can also call them the production overheads. So those are indirect costs. They are also classified into two. We have the indirect material cost and number two, indirect labor cost. Classified into the following. Number one, talk about the indirect material cost. And number B, or number two, indirect labor cost. Now, when we talk about indirect material costs, these are the costs which are incurred but cannot be traced back to the product. So these are the costs of raw material which cannot be traced back to the product. Then indirect labor costs, these are the human labor but have not been directly used in production. For example, we talk about supervisor or watchman. For example, hapo tunasema supervisor or the watchman. Now, when we talk about supervisor or the watchman, now supervisor or the watchman, they have not been included in making that product, but they form a very important role in that part because they maybe safeguard the the product. For example, watchman ameandikwa to make sure that there is no theft and so on. Now, the cost of a watchman is very minimal compared to the cost of making that product. So the cost of paying a watchman is very minimum or minimal compared to the cost of making that product. So if they were to pay the people working in the factory, is minimal compared to the cost of just paying the watchman. So that is what we call the indirect cost. Those are what we call the indirect costs incurred in production. Now, I want to give you a particular format before we go to the final one. I want to give you a particular format which is very, very important. A particular format. So we call them the cost statement. I want to give you just a cost statement before we move on. Cost statement. cost statement. So we have this cost statement. Now, cost statement is just so cost statement. We start with the direct material cost. Direct material cost. Unaweka hapo. Direct labor cost. Unaweka hapo. Then we have the direct wages. Unaweka hapo. Then when you add them together, you get the prime cost. Prime cost. Unaweka hapo. Then you add the indirect cost. Indirect cost. Unaweka hapo. Then we shall get what we call the production cost. Production cost. Now, this is just a simpler cost statement that any company can maintain. So this is just a simpler format. But what I'm interested in is the first is the how do we get the production cost? Now, in most situations in your exam, you shall find that you are not being provided with the direct material cost. So for direct material cost, you need to do a working. So in most cases, for direct material cost, you need to do a working, whether you like it or not. You need to do a working in most scenarios, in most of the in most of the scenarios. So you need to do a